book gets a bit heavy on names here. In the following chapter, a lot of characters are introduced, and they're actual people, and you can look them up. It does get heavy with names, and I do apologize ahead of time if I mispronounce. Actually, in reality, I should have apologized back in chapter 1. It also gets heavy into the way the government and the politics of Japan at that time worked. Bear with me, and please excuse my pronunciation. Okay. Defeated in a skirmish with one of his own generals who attacked him in a sudden fit of revenge, Nobunaga committed suicide in Tokyo at the age of 48. By 1605, some decades later, the incessant warring among the daimyo was essentially over, and Tokugawa Ieyasu had ruled as shogun for 2 years. The lanterns on the streets of Kyoto and Osaka glowed brightly, as they had in the best days of the Ashikaga shogunate, and the prevailing mood was lighthearted and festive. But few were certain the peace would last. More than 100 years of civil strife had so colored the people's view of life that they could only regard the present tranquility as fragile and ephemeral. The capital was thriving, but the tensions of not knowing how long this would last whetted the people's appetite for merrymaking. Though still in control, Ieyasu had officially retired from his position of shogun. While still strong enough to control the other daimyo and defend the family's claim to power, he had passed on his title to his third son, Hidetada. It was rumored that the new shogun would visit Kyoto soon to pay his respects to the emperor, but it was common knowledge that his trip west meant more than a courtesy call. His greatest potential rival, Toyotomi Hideyori, was the son of Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's able successor. Hideyoshi had done his best to ensure that the power remained with the Toyotomis until Hideyori was old enough to exercise it, but the victor at the Sekigahara was Ieyasu. Hideyori still resided at Osaka Castle, and although Ieyasu, rather than have done away with him, permitted him to enjoy a substantial annual income, he was aware that Osaka was a major threat as a possible rallying point of resistance. Many feudal lords knew this too, and hedged their bets, paid equal court to both Hideyori and the shogun. It was often remarked that the former had enough castles and gold to hire every masterless samurai or ronin in the country if he wanted to. Idle speculation on the country's political future formed the bulk of gossip in the Kyoto air. Okay, so real quick, a masterless samurai is known as a ronin. So as we get into this book, you'll see that all these castles, or you'll see that most samurai have a school that they have attended and have learned or picked up a form of fighting with their swords or with wood sticks, whatever it is, but they have a master, right? A ronin is a samurai, so-called samurai, didn't formally get trained, but is a good fighter, right? The ronin, and that's what Musashi is. He is himself his own teacher. Here we go. War's bound to break out sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. These street lanterns could be snuffed out tomorrow. Why worry about it? What happens, happens. Let's enjoy ourselves while we can. The bustling nightlife and booming pleasure quarters were tangible evidence that much of the populace were doing just that. Among those so inclined was a group of samurai now turning the corner to Shiju Avenue. Besides them ran a long wall of white plaster leading to an impressive gate with an imposing roof. A wooden plaque blackened with age announced in barely legible writing, Yoshioka Kempo of Kyoto, military instructor to the Ashikaga Shoguns. The 8 young samurai gave the impression of having practiced sword fighting all day without respite. Some bore wooden swords in addition to the customary steel ones, and others were carrying lances. They looked tough, the kind of men who'd be the first to see bloodshed the moment a clash of arms erupted. Their faces were as hard as stone, and their eyes threatening, as if always on the brink of exploding in rage. "Young master, where are we headed tonight?" they clamored, surrounding their teacher. "Anywhere but where we were last night," he replied. "Why? Those women were falling all over you. They barely looked at the rest of us." "Maybe he's right," another man put it. Why don't we try some place new where no one knows the young master or any of the rest of us? Shouting and carrying on themselves, they seem totally consumed by the question of where to go drinking and whoring. So the men of the house of Yoshioka and the Kempo Style, they have a long lineage of warriors, and Musashi, as he roams the countryside, he's not just being a vagabond. He is actually studying, spending time on multiple crafts, not just his sword. He goes to these temples of martial arts and famous warriors that have developed a style. For example, the Yoshioka school is the Kempo Style. They practice their craft. These kids at the Yoshioka school is a prime example of what happens when you rest on your so-called laurels, right? The father of this school invented a Kempo style of fighting, and these kids just ride that, right? They like any other story, a father or a mother builds a huge company and hands it off to these youngsters, and the youngsters ruin it. They forget what got them there, and they're born into riches, and they just neglect it. Like these kids here, Musashi ends up knocking on their door asking for to meet Sijuro or Densinsharo, and Musashi knows that in order for him to prepare as he goes along on his mission, he's got to challenge these folks. He's got to see how good he really is. So when he gets to this house, they just really don't understand how good he is, and what he's learning is beyond what these kids can do. Right, they're awash with money. They're awash with the fame of their fathers, and now they're just more or less just wasting away the name of the Yoshioka school.